Mind that this issue was at the Supreme Court. The justices would have ultimately had to decide whether or not Williams deserved clemency in this case. They had not ruled. They were expected to rule sometime this afternoon, but the governor decided to come out and say, look, we're going to give this guy a stay regardless, and he has that power. And clearly he's used it.
All right, Scott McLean, thank you so much. I want to bring in somebody who I know has reacted to this. Tricia Bushnell is from the Midwest Innocence Project, and I understand, don't mean to put you on the spot, Tricia, but my producers had dialed you in to be on our show moments ago. When you found out the news, you gave out a hoot and a holler.
Yeah, probably, that's right.
So talk to me. Obviously, you've been working on this case from the very beginning. It was up to the 11th hour. I mean, when we talk about the 11th hour, he was scheduled to be executed at 7 p.m. Eastern today. You guys have been working through the clock. Not only your team at the Midwest Innocence Project, but countless other people have been working on this. Why was this so important to you? What was it that stood out to you as being the most egregious in this case?
Well, certainly, just to be clear, we don't represent Mr. Williams. We're here at the Midwest Innocence Project. He has his own counsel. When it came to our attention, what this new evidence was, that there was DNA evidence on the murder weapon that excluded Mr. Williams as the person who left it, we certainly began to understand the very concerns that we would be executing an innocent man tonight. Based on that, our organization joined with the Innocence Project to ask the governor to do exactly what he's done now, which is grant a stay and appoint a board of inquiry. But for us, what was so troubling was, this is exactly the kind of evidence that a prosecutor would use to convict someone. DNA found on the murder weapon that's not Mr. Williams. So the question is, whose is it? And to the, how can we make a final determination without examining that? And the reality is, no court ever heard it.
Right. How is it that this DNA this DNA science was not included in his case at all? Seems like such a miscarriage of justice. And we have to talk about the backdrop of where this was all happening. We have to talk about the fact that this is happening in Missouri, which we know has a history of problems with race-related issues. This is the state where the NAACP has recently issued a travel advisory for people of color. We also know, this man, as you can tell, African-American, the woman who was killed in such brutal fashion was white. All of this really shows you that there was a lot at play in the backdrop of this trial, even with this case, that further complicated it.
Exactly. And in fact, Mr. Williams' case had what we call Batson violations, which is racial discrimination in the jury selection process. The prosecutors in his case used what's been called the postal workers gambit, where knowing that postal workers are predominantly African-American in St. Louis, they'll just strike all jurors that are postal workers in order to get rid of African-Americans. And that's what they did in this case. So they lost 6 out of 7 African-American jurors.
We know this battle for Marcellus is far from over. And as you mentioned, his defense team will be working to make sure that he has the best representation as possible. And I know the Innocence Project, the Midwest chapter, and also the national chapter is going to be watching this very closely. But from here, it goes to a board of inquiry, again, made up a panel of that will include retired Missouri judges. You have confidence in this panel?
I have confidence that if all of the evidence is heard, then yes, they can come to a conclusion. So this panel, a board of inquiry, is something that's happened before. It happened in Lloyd Schloop's case, who was a man on death row in Missouri, whose conviction was later overturned. But we know in Missouri that when judges are presented with all of the evidence, they can get it right. There have been 4 exonerations from death row in Missouri as it is. So understanding that they'll go through the whole process, they'll look at everything before them, then we certainly hope that they'll arrive at a fair and just conclusion.
Well, this is not his day to die. That has been decided by the governor, and I know that you have many cases like this that the Innocence Project is working to shine light on. We thank you, Tricia Bushnell, for you and your compatriots of what you do to make sure justice is served, and I'm really glad we got your reaction to this case of Marcellus Williams. I appreciate it.
Thank you.